What if the very advice you've been told to fix your thyroid was actually making your symptoms worse? Imagine struggling with fatigue, weight gain, depression, or brain fog only to be told your thyroid tests are normal. What if the problem runs much deeper than what those standard tests reveal? And here's the real shocker. Thyroid disease isn't just a women's problem. Men suffer silently too, often undiagnosed, while their health declines year after year. Hello health champions, my name is Dr. Nana, and today we're going to uncover the absolute best way to truly address thyroid issues. I'll also explain why much of the conventional advice and treatment you've heard may not only be incomplete but could actually make things worse. By the end of this video, you'll know how to avoid the biggest pitfalls and start taking smart, effective steps in the right direction. Now, when it comes to thyroid problems, the gland can either run too fast or too slow. But here's the key, about 95% of cases are hypothyroid, which means the gland runs too slow. The symptoms are wide-ranging fatigue, depression, constipation, dry skin, weight gain, puffiness in the face, hoarseness, joint pain, muscle weakness, elevated cholesterol, heavy or irregular periods, brittle hair or nails, a slow heartbeat, cold sensitivity, and even memory problems. Another common complication is an enlarged thyroid gland, or goiter. Think about that list for a moment. When one small gland can affect everything from your mood, to your weight, to your heart rate, you begin to see just how critical the thyroid really is. It influences so many systems at so many different levels in the body. That's why I often say, the thyroid isn't just important, it's a master regulator. Unfortunately, thyroid disease is sometimes brushed off as mostly a female issue. And yes, women are diagnosed more often, but here's the truth. Men have thyroids too, and many of them struggle silently. The difference? Women tend to seek help when they're exhausted, cold, or not feeling well. Men, on the other hand, often don't complain until things are far worse. That's why official numbers can be misleading. Statistics say only about 5% of adults are diagnosed with thyroid problems, the majority being women. But in my clinic, I believe the real number is much higher, closer to 30–50% of people showing signs of thyroid dysfunction, even if their blood work doesn't scream disease. And this doesn't necessarily mean full-blown autoimmune conditions or extreme lab values. It often shows up subtly, quietly, affecting energy, mood, weight, and overall quality of life. That's why men in particular need to pay attention. Just because you don't complain doesn't mean your thyroid isn't slowing you down. But here's where it gets even more frustrating. The standard medical model for testing and treatment often falls short. If you've ever had your thyroid checked, you know the routine doctors usually run just one test, or thyroid stimulating hormone. Now let's break it down. The thyroid system starts with the hypothalamus, a walnut-sized gland at the base of your brain. It acts like your body's thermostat, regulating things like pH, hunger, thirst, oxygen, and hormone balance. It releases thyrotropion-releasing hormone, which signals the pituitary gland to release ch, then tells the thyroid to go to work. And here's where the first big problem lies. The normal range for ch is 0.5 to 5.0. That's a tenfold difference. You could swing widely within that range, feel miserable, and still be told your results are normal. In my experience, a truly healthy range is much narrower, around 1.8 to 3.0. Even more concerning, many blood panels don't test anything beyond ch. But remember, ch itself is not even a thyroid hormone. It's a pituitary hormone, reflecting only what the brain is telling the thyroid to do, not how well the thyroid is actually performing. When the thyroid receives the signal, it produces thyroxine T4, which is technically thyroid hormone. But here's another catch. T4 is inactive. It doesn't do the heavy lifting until it's converted into triiodothyronine T3, the active form that drives metabolism and energy. And guess where most of that conversion happens? In the liver. So if your doctor only checks ch, they're missing the bigger picture, the delicate dance between the hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid, and liver. And without understanding that system, treatment often misses the mark. This process also includes a negative feedback loop, where the body regulates itself based on how much thyroid hormone is circulating. But if testing and treatment only focus on ch, patients are left frustrated, symptomatic, and often untreated. And that's just the beginning of what you need to know. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into the thyroid's conversion process and why so many people remain misdiagnosed or undiagnosed despite ongoing symptoms. Stay with me. In the last section, we looked at how thyroid hormone production begins in the hypothalamus and moves through the pituitary before signaling the thyroid itself. Now, let's continue that journey and uncover why the standard testing and treatment approach is so limited. The negative feedback loop: when the thyroid produces thyroxine, or T4, it enters the bloodstream and eventually makes its way back to the hypothalamus. If there's too much T4 circulating, the hypothalamus senses it and sends a message to scale back under. Less T means less, which slows thyroid stimulation. On the flip side, if there isn't enough T4, the hypothalamus increases T. This pushes the pituitary to release more T, which should drive the thyroid to produce additional hormone. This constant back and forth process is called a negative feedback loop. And while the word negative might sound alarming, in reality it's a good thing. It's how the body maintains balance. Standard treatment: too narrow a lensures where the problem begins. In conventional medicine, the only marker doctors usually look at is Ch. If Ch is high, they interpret that as the thyroid underperforming, not producing enough T4. The standard response? Prescribe Synthroid, a synthetic version of T4. From there, the doctor adjusts your dose of Synthroid based solely on how your Ch responds. If you're given too much, your Ch drops to low. If the dose isn't enough, your Ch stays elevated. And so the treatment continues in this cycle, endlessly chasing a number. But here's the flaw. This approach focuses on a single marker, Ch, which isn't even a thyroid hormone, it's a pituitary hormone. And while Synthroid can be appropriate in many cases, it doesn't address the full complexity of thyroid function. Why? One marker isn't enough to really understand why this narrow focus is inadequate. We need to step back and look at the bigger picture. The thyroid doesn't work in isolation. It's connected to nearly every organ and tissue in your body. This brings us to something known as Harrower's chart. At first glance, it looks overwhelming: lines crisscrossing, connecting every gland and organ system. But this chart exists for a reason, to show just how interconnected your thyroid truly is. Henry Harrower, known as the father of modern endocrinology, believed the thyroid was so central that he placed it at the very heart of his diagram. Each solid line represents a stimulating pathway, and each dashed line represents an inhibiting pathway. In other words, every gland is influencing others, sometimes pushing them to work harder, sometimes telling them to slow down. When you see this complexity, it becomes clear, you can't possibly evaluate thyroid health by looking at Ch alone. There are too many moving parts. Why patients feel better, then worse. This explains why so many people go to their doctor, get diagnosed with an underactive thyroid, start taking Synthroid, and feel better for a couple of months only to crash again later. At first, their Ch improves and symptoms may ease. But because so many other factors are involved, the relief doesn't last. They're left wondering, why do I still feel tired? Why is my weight not budging? Why are my symptoms coming back? The answer lies in the fact that thyroid health isn't just about hormone levels, it's about the entire ecosystem of tissues, signals, and conversions working in harmony. The holistic view. More than just numbers. This is why Dr. Nana emphasizes a holistic view of the body. Every component, every tissue, gland, and system is equally important. If we isolate one number like Ch and base everything on that, we miss the bigger picture. One of the first distinctions we need to make is between the health of the tissue itself and the markers on a blood test. The two don't always align. You can have thyroid tissue that is perfectly healthy, but the blood markers look off because the thyroid is receiving the wrong signals. In that case, you may be labeled hypo or hyperthyroid even though the gland itself isn't damaged. On the other hand, you may have thyroid tissue that's already breaking down, but the markers haven't shifted yet. Or perhaps other markers are compensating, creating the illusion of normal results. This mismatch explains why so many people are told everything looks fine even though they clearly feel unwell. The fragility of thyroid tissue. Thyroid cells are delicate. They're extremely sensitive to toxins, infections, and environmental stressors. Even something that's absolutely essential for thyroid function, iodine, can become toxic in the wrong amounts. And iodine isn't the only concern. On the periodic table, iodine sits in the same family as other elements that are far more toxic, like bromine, fluorine, and chlorine. These siblings can interfere with thyroid health, displacing iodine and further stressing the gland. It's almost like a family of look-alike imposters, where the dangerous members crowd out the helpful one. Bringing it together, so let's recap what we've learned in this section. T4 production is tightly regulated by a feedback loop involving the hypothalamus and pituitary. Standard treatment focuses narrowly on and relies heavily on synthetic T4, often missing the complexity of the thyroid system. Harrower's chart illustrates the interconnectedness of all glands, showing why thyroid function can't be understood in isolation. Blood markers don't always reflect the actual health of thyroid tissue, and thyroid cells themselves are highly sensitive, vulnerable to toxins, and even challenged by substances that look like iodine. All of this points to one truth: thyroid health cannot be reduced to a single test or a single treatment. It's a whole body issue that requires a broader perspective. In the next part, we'll dig deeper into how toxins, pathogens, and even essential elements like iodine can disrupt thyroid function and what that means for anyone struggling with symptoms today. In the last section, we talked about how thyroid tissue is incredibly sensitive not only to toxins, but even to essential elements like iodine and its chemical relatives. Now, let's look closer at how these imposter substances disrupt thyroid health and what that means for your body. Halogens and their toxic impact. In the periodic table, iodine sits in a group called the halogens. These elements all share similar chemical properties, which means they can easily compete with each other inside the body. Unfortunately, most of them are highly toxic. This group includes fluorine, chlorine, and bromine substances we're exposed to every single day. Think about it. Fluorine and chlorine are routinely added to our drinking water, while bromine is commonly used in processed foods and industrial products. And here's the problem: your thyroid is a magnet for these chemicals. Why? Because about 70 to 80% of the body's iodine is stored in the thyroid. That's where hormone production takes place. The thyroid is designed to capture iodine, but it can't always tell the difference between helpful iodine and harmful lookalikes. So when you're consuming fluorine, chlorine, or bromine through water or food, those toxins can get pulled into the thyroid tissue itself. Over time, this creates damage and triggers one of the biggest thyroid health problems we see today: autoimmune reactions. When the immune system turns on the thyroid, here's what happens. As thyroid cells are damaged, they begin to break apart and leak into places they don't belong. The immune system recognizes these misplaced cells as a threat, and it does exactly what it's supposed to do: it attacks. But if this destruction continues over time, the immune system can go into overdrive, attacking not only the broken down fragments, but the thyroid tissue itself. That's how autoimmune thyroid conditions develop. And once that cycle starts, it becomes very difficult to stop. To make matters worse, other health issues can fan the flames. A leaky gut, poor gut flora, or food allergies can confuse the immune system even further. When your gut barrier is weak, foreign proteins slip into the bloodstream. The immune system reacts aggressively, and sometimes it mistakenly adds your thyroid to the list of targets. Think of it like your thyroid is being peppered with bullets. Every shot weakens the gland a little more, and the immune system's attempt to clean up the mess creates even more collateral damage. Goiter. Enlargement of the thyroid. Now let's connect this to another condition you've probably heard of: goiter. A goiter is simply an enlargement of the thyroid gland. And while it may look alarming, it doesn't always mean the thyroid is sick. Here's why. Thyroid hormones are built around iodine. Take T4, for example. Each molecule has 4 iodine atoms attached to it. If your body doesn't have enough iodine available, the thyroid can't produce adequate hormones. So what does it do? It adapts. The gland starts creating more and more receptor sites in an attempt to grab every last particle of iodine it can find. The tissue begins to grow, sometimes dramatically. In severe cases, goiters can swell to the size of a football. But here's the key point: the thyroid tissue itself may still be perfectly healthy. It's not diseased, it's doing exactly what it's programmed to do, trying desperately to capture scarce iodine. And as soon as iodine becomes available, the thyroid can begin to normalize and the enlargement may shrink. The goitrogen question. This brings us to a topic that causes a lot of confusion: goitrogens. Many people hear the word and immediately worry that eating certain foods like broccoli, kale, or cabbage will damage their thyroid. They read articles that say, avoid these foods if you have thyroid issues, and naturally, they get scared. But here's the truth: goitrogens don't directly harm the thyroid. Instead, they contain compounds that compete with iodine for binding sites. In other words, if your iodine intake is already too low, eating large amounts of these foods can make the deficiency worse by blocking what little iodine is available. That's why context matters. If you're getting enough iodine in your diet, eating cruciferous vegetables isn't dangerous. In fact, they're packed with nutrients and support overall health. The only time they pose a real risk is when iodine is deficient, to begin with. Bringing it all together, so let's step back and recap. Halogens like fluorine, chlorine, and bromine compete with iodine and often get absorbed into the thyroid, where they cause tissue damage. This damage can spark autoimmune attacks, especially if gut health is poor or food sensitivities are present. Goiter develops as an adaptive response to iodine deficiency, not necessarily as a sign of disease. Goitrogenic foods only become problematic in the context of low iodine intake. When you look at it this way, the thyroid isn't just fragile, it's a survivor. It does everything it can to adapt, capture nutrients, and keep your body balanced even under stress. The challenge is making sure we're supporting it with the right environment. And that's exactly what we'll explore in the next section: how to separate myth from fact when it comes to diet, iodine, and thyroid health, so you can make smart choices without unnecessary fear. Stay with me, I'm Dr. Nana, and we'll dig deeper in the next part. In the last part, we explored how goitrogens aren't the villains they're often made out to be. They don't damage the thyroid, they simply compete for iodine. Now let's go deeper into why the conventional model of thyroid testing still falls short, especially when stress enters the picture. Goitrogens and iodine deficiency. Here's the truth: goitrogens only become a problem if you're already iodine deficient. If your diet lacks iodized salt or you don't have access to iodine supplements, then eating large amounts of these foods can amplify the deficiency. But when iodine intake is adequate, goitrogens aren't harmful at all. They don't injure the thyroid tissue, they just compete for raw materials. So, the takeaway is simple: goitrogens are only an issue if iodine is missing in the first place. If you have enough iodine, you can enjoy nutrient-rich vegetables without fear. Why the standard model breaks down. This brings us back to how traditional medicine often reduces thyroid health to a single number, Ch. In the standard model, everything looks black and white. If your Ch falls within the broad range of 0.5 to 5.0, you're considered normal. Step outside of that range, and suddenly you're labeled with a disease. The logic is straightforward: the higher your Ch, the harder your pituitary is pushing the thyroid, and the more hypothyroid you are. The lower your Ch, the more hyperthyroid activity you're assumed to have. While this isn't entirely wrong, it's only a very small piece of the truth. Instead of seeing thyroid health as in or out, we should picture it as a gradient. Within that gradient, there's a sweet spot where most people feel healthy, somewhere around 1.8 to 3.0. Outside of that range, even if you're technically normal, symptoms can still appear. The role of stress and cortisol. Now let's talk about stress. You've heard the phrase, pain hurts but stress kills. Stress impacts the thyroid in ways the standard model doesn't recognize. When stress is high, so is cortisol, your body's primary stress hormone. Elevated cortisol makes the hypothalamus less sensitive to what's happening in the body. It's almost like the hypothalamus is asleep at the wheel. Here's what that means. Under normal conditions, if T4 levels are low, the hypothalamus increases TR, which triggers more Ch production. But under stress, the hypothalamus doesn't respond properly. So you could end up with both low T4 and low Ch, a combination the standard model doesn't account for. This is one way stress scrambles the entire thyroid regulation system. Conversion problems in the liver and gut. Stress does more than blunt hypothalamus signaling. It also interferes with how T4 converts to T3, the active thyroid hormone. Most of this conversion happens in the liver. But here's the catch: under stress, more of the conversion shifts towards something called reverse T3. Reverse T3 is a mirror image of normal T3. It looks similar, but doesn't fit into the receptors the same way, so it's useless. The more stress and inflammation you have, the higher your reverse T3 levels climb, leaving you functionally hypothyroid even if your blood markers suggest everything looks fine. And don't forget, the gut plays a big role here too. As much as 20 to 25% of thyroid hormone conversion relies on healthy gut bacteria. If your microbiome is damaged, whether from antibiotics, poor diet, or chronic inflammation, thyroid conversion suffers dramatically. When normal isn't normal, this is where things get really confusing for patients. Imagine you're sitting in a doctor's office. You feel all the classic hypothyroid symptoms: fatigue, weight gain, constipation, depression. You're convinced your thyroid is underactive. But then the lab results come back. Your Ch is low, maybe between 0.7 and 1.2. In the conventional model, that points toward hyperthyroidism. The doctor looks at you and says, "You're fine." You're actually leaning hyper, not hypo. And yet, you feel terrible. This is what Dr. Nana calls functional hypothyroidism. The numbers may look normal, or even suggest the opposite problem, but functionally your thyroid isn't doing its job. This mismatch happens because the tests are too limited, the markers too narrow, and the body's complexity overlooked. What really needs to be addressed if we want to restore thyroid health, we have to look beyond. That means addressing the actual factors damaging thyroid tissue in the first place. These can include toxins like heavy metals or industrial chemicals, pathogens that trigger chronic inflammation, autoimmune activity that confuses the immune system into attacking the thyroid, conversion problems in the liver and gut. Each of these issues requires its own approach. And until they're addressed, simply taking a pill for itch won't resolve the deeper dysfunction. Summary of this section: let's bring it all together. Goitrogens aren't dangerous unless iodine is deficient. The standard CH model oversimplifies thyroid health, missing the gray areas. Stress and high cortisol blunt hypothalamus signaling, creating misleading lab results. Stress also alters conversion, leading to high reverse T3 and low active T3. Gut health plays a surprisingly large role, accounting for nearly a quarter of thyroid conversion. Many patients with normal labs still suffer from functional hypothyroidism. In the next section, we'll take a closer look at how blood tests can reveal hidden conversion issues and how the liver and gut influence your thyroid far more than most doctors ever explain. Stay tuned, I'm Dr. Nana, and we'll continue uncovering the truth about thyroid health. In the last section, we uncovered how stress, inflammation, and gut health all play a major role in thyroid conversion. Now let's talk about why simply testing CH isn't enough, and what you should be asking your doctor to check if you really want to understand what's going on. Why? You need more than CH. The reality is that most people have no idea whether they have thyroid issues. And even when they do, the condition is often misinterpreted because the testing is incomplete. The standard starting point is a blood test, but checking CH alone won't give you the full picture. At the very least, you should ask for CH, T4, and T3. These three markers will tell you if you're trending hypo, hyper, or somewhere in between. If your CH is high, that usually means hypothyroidism, the thyroid is underperforming. If your CH is very low, typically under 0.5, it points toward hyperthyroidism. If your levels are within the wide middle range, you may be considered normal or euthyroid. But here's where so many people get overlooked. In between those extremes lies a gray area called functional hypothyroidism. That's when you look normal on paper, but your body tells a very different story. Spotting conversion issues. One of the most common hidden problems is poor conversion from T4 to T3. Remember, T4 is the inactive thyroid hormone. It has to be converted to T3 in order to do its job. Here's how to spot a conversion issue. Let's say your T4 levels are right in the middle of the normal range. That means your thyroid is producing enough T4. But when you check T3, you find it's hovering at the very bottom of the range. On paper, both are normal, but relatively speaking, your T3 is too low compared to your T4. That's a sign that conversion is failing. Where does this conversion happen? Mostly in the liver, with support from healthy gut bacteria. And while some of the T4 naturally turns into reverse T3, a useless mirror image, the more stress and inflammation you have, the more of it gets wasted in that direction. That's why it can be helpful to order a reverse T3 test. This isn't included in a standard T3 measurement. If your reverse T3 is high, it's a strong indication that stress and inflammation are blocking your conversion process. The role of gut bacteria and micronutrient. If your T3 is low, don't overlook the gut. A disrupted microbiome can reduce thyroid conversion by as much as 20 to 25%. That's nearly a quarter of your thyroid function gone, simply because the gut flora is unhealthy. And then there are the nutrients your body absolutely needs for conversion. Surprisingly, the most critical ones aren't iodine at this stage, it's zinc and selenium. Without these micronutrients, the enzymes that transform T4 into T3 can't work properly. So, even if your thyroid is making enough T4, you'll still feel hypothyroid because your body can't activate it. Hashimoto's thyroiditis. The hidden epidemic. Now we come to the big one, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. There are regions in the world where iodine deficiency remains the main cause of hypothyroidism. If the soil is depleted, if iodized salt isn't available, or if supplements are scarce, the thyroid simply can't get enough iodine to function. In those cases, Iodine deficiency is the leading problem. But in much of today's world, especially where iodized salt and supplements are readily available, the number one cause of hypothyroidism is Hashimoto's, an autoimmune disease. This is crucial to understand. If your thyroid is underactive because of Hashimoto's, then simply taking T4 medication like Synthroid only improves the lab results. It doesn't stop the underlying problem, your immune system attacking and destroying thyroid tissue. On paper, your blood markers may look better, but behind the scenes, the disease is still progressing. And if left unchecked, one autoimmune disorder often opens the door to others. What starts as Hashimoto's can snowball into multiple autoimmune conditions that affect different organs. Why this matters for treatment? There's why this is so important. If you have Hashimoto's and you're only treated with synthetic T4, the underlying destruction continues. You might feel a little better for a while, but the disease is still advancing. Worse yet, there's another danger: iodine supplementation. For years, iodine has been promoted as the go-to solution for thyroid problems. And while it is essential in areas of true deficiency, in cases of Hashimoto's, adding extra iodine can actually make the autoimmune attack worse. That's why understanding the root cause, whether your thyroid issue is due to iodine deficiency, poor conversion, or autoimmunity, is so critical. Without that clarity, treatment risks becoming a band-aid, not a solution. Bringing it together so far, we've learned that relying on alone isn't enough. You need at least T4 and T3. Conversion issues are common and often hidden in normal labs. Stress, inflammation, liver function, and gut health all play major roles in conversion. Zinc and selenium are vital for activating thyroid hormone. Today, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is the leading cause of hypothyroidism in much of the world. Treating Hashimoto's as if it were simple iodine deficiency or low T4 misses the big picture and allows the disease to progress. In the next section, we'll explore the risks of oversupplementation, why iodine isn't always the answer, and what you should really be focusing on if you want to protect your thyroid long-term. Stay tuned. I'm Dr. Nana, and we'll dive deeper in the next part. In the last section, we discussed Hashimoto's thyroiditis, the autoimmune disease that has become the leading cause of hypothyroidism in much of the modern world. Now, let's bring everything together, understanding why iodine can sometimes make things worse, how to properly test for autoimmune thyroid disease, and most importantly, what you can do to take back control of your health. Why iodine can backfire in autoimmune disease. At first glance, it seems obvious. If iodine is essential for thyroid hormone production, why not just supplement more of it? But here's the danger: if you already have an autoimmune condition, extra iodine can actually fuel the fire. When you increase iodine intake, you provide more raw material for thyroid hormone activity. That might sound good, but it also makes the thyroid more visible to the immune system. And when your immune system is already attacking thyroid tissue, more activity means more exposure, which leads to stronger autoimmune attacks. That's why in all the hypothyroid cases Dr. Nana has worked with, supplementing iodine right at the beginning has rarely been the solution. Only after the autoimmune response has been calmed can iodine sometimes be carefully introduced. In the early stages, though, it usually does more harm than good. The importance of antibody testing. So how do you know if your thyroid issue is autoimmune? The answer lies in antibody testing. One of the most common markers is called thyroid peroxidase antibody (POAB). Labs often bundle this with a few other antibody tests, but POAB is the key one to look for. Unfortunately, even antibody testing has become confusing. For example, in some labs in Georgia, anything under 30 for units is reported as normal. But think about this: antibodies are your immune system attacking tissue. The ideal level should be close to 0. Yes, it's true that a tiny amount of antibodies is normal because the body is always cleaning up old cells. But 34 is far too high. In other parts of the country, the normal cutoff is 16, and in some regions, it's under 9. Years ago, most labs used under 5 as the standard. So why has the definition of normal crept upward over time? It's not because people are healthier. Quite the opposite. As more people develop toxicity and autoimmune issues, average antibody levels have climbed. Instead of recognizing this as a red flag, labs have simply raised the normal threshold so that fewer people get classified as having autoimmune disease. But here's the truth: if your antibodies are in the teens or 20s, that's a sign you need to pay attention. Don't dismiss it just because your lab says it's normal. The earlier you recognize autoimmunity, the better chance you have to slow it down. Taking action. what you can do. Now you've seen how complicated thyroid health can get. It's not just about T4 or even iodine. It's about tissues, signals, the immune system, toxins, and lifestyle. So what should you do next? The first step is to find a knowledgeable professional. While there are many things you can do on your own, thyroid health is too important and too complex to navigate completely alone. If you strongly suspect thyroid issues, work with a practitioner who understands functional testing and autoimmunity. That said, there are still many steps. You can start today. Step 1. Fix your metabolism. Go low carb and higher in healthy fats, especially if you struggle with insulin resistance. High insulin disrupts the entire body, throwing off regulation and fueling inflammation. If you're already metabolically healthy, a low to moderate carbohydrate diet may be appropriate. But across the board, reducing sugar and avoiding blood sugar swings benefits everyone. Step 2. Clean up your water. If you live in an area where chlorine and fluorine are added to the water supply, stop drinking tap water. These halogens directly compete with iodine and damage thyroid function. And remember, it's not just what you drink, it's what you absorb through your skin. A hot shower can expose you to the equivalent of several glasses of chlorinated water. The best option is to invest in a high-quality water filter for both your drinking supply and, ideally, a whole house system for your shower and taps. Clean water is a critical step in protecting your thyroid. Step 3. Support your liver. Your liver isn't just a detox organ, it's also the primary site where T4 is converted into active T3. A toxic or sluggish liver means poor thyroid conversion. That's why doing a safe liver detox and supporting liver health with real food, hydration, and antioxidants can make a huge difference. Step 4. Heal the gut. If you have leaky gut, your immune system is constantly bombarded with proteins and toxins slipping into the bloodstream. This fuels inflammation and promotes autoimmune reactions. Healing the gut reduces the immune triggers that attack the thyroid. Once the gut lining is healthier, you can begin restoring your microbiome with probiotics. But don't rush this step. Probiotics can't thrive if the gut environment is still damaged. Healing comes first, then rebuilding. Step 5. Eliminate allergens. Come on, allergens drive autoimmunity. The most problematic ones are wheat, not just gluten. Wheat itself is inflammatory. Corn, so a pasteurized dairy. Most people tolerate butter and yogurt better, but in general, cutting out pasteurized dairy reduces immune stress. Avoiding these allergens can immediately reduce thyroid inflammation. Step 6. Consider an autoimmune protocol. If your symptoms persist, look into an autoimmune diet (AIP). This takes things further than paleo by removing not just grains and dairy, but also nightshades and lectin-rich foods. People with autoimmune conditions tend to be hypersensitive, and EIP can help identify hidden triggers that worsen thyroid attacks. So here's the big picture. Don't rush into iodine supplementation. It often makes autoimmune thyroid disease worse. Use antibody testing, especially POAB, to see if your thyroid issue is autoimmune. Be cautious about what normal really means. Lab cutoffs don't always reflect true health. Support your thyroid holistically through diet, water, liver health, gut healing, and allergen avoidance. If needed, explore deeper protocols like AIP to calm the immune system. Thyroid health isn't about chasing numbers, it's about creating the right environment for your body to function. I'm Dr. Nana, and I hope this series has helped you see just how important your thyroid is, and why it deserves more than a quick glance at lab results. The thyroid is delicate, but it's also resilient. With the right steps, you can calm autoimmunity, restore balance, and reclaim your energy and clarity. If this video gave you value, do me a favor, hit that like button, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Senior Health Boost. By subscribing, you'll never miss another life-saving video, and together, we can spread knowledge that changes lives. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of your thyroid, take care of your body, and I'll see you in the next video.